what I wanted to speak about something a little bit non-conventional. Normally speaking, Inyan and Nigla, Inyan and Halacha, which also maybe I'll do some of that.
Time for meeting.
But considering that it's 50 years from Av Tishrei, and there was a unique method in Limud Torah that the Rebbe revealed then, which is the Inyan of Pshuta Shel Mikra, of learning Chumash according to the derech of Pshuta Shel Mikra as explained by Rashi. And there were things that the Rebbe said in the course of the years that didn't seem to receive too much stress. So I thought this might be an opportunity to stress them. Better? The Rebbe stressed that he was not, as the Sichas developed through the years, the Rebbe made it clear that it was not just that he wanted to keep explaining Rashi's according to the derech of Pshuta Shel Mikra, that he was trying to ingrain in us the proper way that one should learn Chumash. In other words, learning Chumash, not just learning Rashi, it's learning Chumash through the eyes of the way Rashi understands Pshuta Shel Mikra, the way one is supposed to understand the pasuk Chumash. So in Parshas Vayakil, Tavshin Mem Vav, so the Rebbe, one of the Haras Atminim, the Kovtzim that everybody would write in, so the Rebbe said that instead of picking on the Rashi himself, it was not, they printed down the Chiddush they had all Katava, Lagabe Dinyan from the Chumash Rashi, and about how the Waldman from Crown Heights asked the Rebbe, you should tell him first what the Rashi is before Shabbos. So the Rebbe says, usually I don't know which Rashi it's going to be before Shabbos. He picks it out later. So the Rebbe himself would pick the Rashi. So the Rebbe, starting Vayakil, Tavshin Mem Vav, the Rebbe said he's not going to pick the Rashi anymore, that people should write in questions that they have on Chumash, or questions on the Rashi, and then the Rebbe will pick one of them. The Rebbe brought 3 Mailish Shabbat. The third one, the Rebbe said, first of all, it saves him the problem of looking for a Rashi. And then he knows that if it's something which is in the Kovtzim, it's something that people don't understand, so at least it's explaining something. Here the Rebbe said explain it Rashi, he doesn't know, maybe the people understand it already, so he doesn't need to say the Sikha. This way he knows that they don't understand it. The Rebbe said that this way will show the interest of the call and help them listen better and to understand better. And the Rebbe smiled and he said he's not taking responsibility to answer all the questions that people write in. And even on the one Rashi he picks to speak about, it doesn't guarantee he's going to answer all the questions. Then the Rebbe adds a very interesting thing. And B'chlal, kol musik shel eschayvus l'tayret shaylu beniged lo klalei haseichel. The whole idea that every question needs an answer is contrary to the whole idea of seichel, of learning. That if a person feels that they must find an answer to a question, so they might learn a crooked way because they feel that they have to answer every question. That's not the proper way to learn. Derech halibna nacheni, the Rebbe said, that you're not obligated to find the answer to the question. You have to work very hard to understand the inyan properly, everybody according to the maximum ability. And certainly if you work hard enough, there'll be your guide to matzos. So the Rebbe started at that kufa, Tavshin Mem Vav, about answering questions people would write in. I was teaching Tavshin Mem Ches and Chanuch Lanar. Chanuch Lanar is not the yeshiva for Iluyim. I taught once a week I would teach Chumash Rashi. And one week one of the boys asked me a question, pushed a question on Chumash, and I couldn't answer it. I answered it. The answer's all over in Chassidus, but it's not Pshuta Shel Mikra. So I said, you know what, we'll write it in. Wrote it in, and the Rebbe said a Sikha on it. The Sikha was Muga, the Sikha is now Lakut Sichas. To ask a good question is not difficult. Sometimes to find the answer is difficult, but you're not mechuyev to find the answer. What I didn't find, I'm sure one of the Bekim over here knows where it is, but I remember the Sikha where the Rebbe said that one Sikha in the middle where the Rebbe said, B'chlal, you ask a question and then think you already fulfilled your obligation. How do you ask a question? You didn't even look in Teira Shlema for the answer. Everybody looked at each other. Who thought in the world of looking into Teira Shlema? How many people own the B'chal Teira Shlema? Now you have Hebrew books, you can get the whole thing for free. But Teira Shlema is to go and look in Teira Shlema for an answer to your questions. So then you couldn't write in the question. You had to do a little work. You had to look in Teira Shlema for an answer. Not that you expect the Ben Chumash Lemikra to own a Teira Shlema and to look in the Teira Shlema, but many times you see things that you didn't happen. You see that it's Pshuta Shemikra. And then it came at Kufa where the Rebbe said that people think they could just ask the questions and then go to sleep. They don't have to work hard to find an answer. So therefore, I want you to write the answers too. I mean, those they remember during that Kufa, the Rebbe, Friday night by davening, by L'chad Deidi, the Rebbe would be going through the Kovtziv. The Rebbe would read these on his shtender. And then the Rebbe demanded that people should come with answers also. And the Rebbe evidently was not so happy with the volume or the quality of the answers being written. And if I remember correctly, there was one Sikha the Rebbe said that if it doesn't change, that I'm going to stop answering the questions, if people are not working hard enough about it. And then finally the Rebbe stopped. I don't remember whether there's a Sikha or not, but I remember the Rebbe clearly saying that the point of this derech of Pirush Rashi is not that everybody should listen to me say Sichas. The point is that everybody themselves should work hard to understand Rashi understand Chumash, and the Rashi according to this derech. And this is something. So recently they're coming out with a new druk of the Tanya with the Rebbe's Haras and so on and so forth. They've quoted over there a letter from the Rebbe where he says there are different things that the Frierdiker Rebbe wanted, and before your Shvat we're not finished. He says it doesn't mean you're potter from it. It means that it's going to take a little longer, but it's Siddim and Mechuyev to be mashlim. And this Inyan is a whole derech and limut. And the fact is, through the years in teaching, I've tried a few things that I'd like to share with you. And I think that the matana that the Rebbe gave through the Rashi Siches, that the Rebbe said with Muga and Bilti Muga, is doesn't even come close in a way to the matana he gave to the new look, the proper simple look at how one is supposed to learn Chumash Rashi. I'll just give you a few dugmais of different things the Rebbe said. Remember the Rebbe quoted in Parshat Vayishlach. The Rebbe here says, "Vayikra Yaakov Shema Mokam Pniyah. Hiroisi Elokim Ponim El Ponim Bertinotzel Nafshi." And then the next pasuk says, "Vayizor Chlei Hashemesh Kasher Overes Pnuel." So first it says Pniel, and then the next pasuk says Pnuel. So there's Biurim in Kabbalah, there's Biurim in Chassidus. Why over here it's Pniel with a Yud, and why over here it's Pnuel with a Vav? So the Rebbe said that any Ben Chamish Lemikra is going to read this pasuk, and he wants to know. Over here it says the name of the place is Pniel, and then it says he went by Pnuel. Why is it over here said Pniel, and over here says Pnuel? So the Rebbe could be quite biting. At times he says the adults, simple questions like this, nobody pays any attention to. So Megei Dorf Yavasa. He said, but the child is bothered by the question, and he's going to answer the question. And the fact that Rashi does not answer this question does not mean that it's not a question. It's basically everything you don't understand is a question. And we're supposed to be asking those questions. And that's the dialogue, kiviyachol, between the Chumash and the Rashi, is that you learn the Chumash, and then if something doesn't make sense, or something seems to be extra, or something seems to be contradictory, something is a simple question, so then you ask a question. And then you look in the Rashi for the answer. Sometimes Rashi doesn't give the answer. So you look over at Pniel, Pnuel, Rashi doesn't give an answer. So sometimes it's something which is Al-Pi Sod, Al-Pi Remez. There's no answer in Pshut Shemikra. But other times there is. But here the Rebbe said that the children, unlike the adults, they remember what they learned before. So we see earlier in Chumash that when it comes, the Eibishter was giving the names. The Eibishter gave Chava the name Chava. Why? Because she was Aim Kol Chai. So according to this, the Ben Chamish Lemikra asks a question. If she was named because she was Aim Kol Chai, what should be her name? Chaya. Not Chava. So if you look over there, so Rashi explained it over there. So Rashi doesn't have to come and explain again Pniel Pnuel. That we see when it comes to names, a Vav and a Yud can be interchanged. It doesn't mean that because you didn't have the Shaila that you're so smart. It means you didn't understand the Chumash properly. Or you didn't think about the Chumash properly. If there's a pasuk and you look at it and you don't ask the question, so that's not the derech of Chumash. You're going to start asking questions in Chumash, there's going to be no end. So there'll be no end. What are you supposed to do? Everybody knows the mashal. It says by Matan Torah, al hein hein v'al lav lav. Where does it say that? Which pasuk does it say? So it says, "V'daber Elokim is called Devarim ha'ela lemer." So the word lemer, so those that learn to teach the psukim in Yiddish, V'daber Hashem al Moshe lemer, Vadaber Hashem al Moshe. No. You touch me up. No, there is no Leimer. Azay zu sagen. Azay zu sagen. What does it mean, Azay zu sagen? Leimer, Azay zu sagen. Azay zu sagen. What does that mean? So in Pshudish Mikra, what it means, which itself, how good for Shaila, how's the Bet Chamish Mikra supposed to know that? Okay, good. But what it means, Vadaber Hashem al Moshe, Lamer, there's a second Lamer. There's the first Vadaber Hashem al Moshe, that Hashem spoke to Moshe. And then there's a Lamer that Moshe tells the Bnei Yisrael. So therefore we see, anytime it says Vadaber Moshe el Hashem Lamer, Rashi explains it. All the other Lamers Rashi doesn't explain. When it says Vadaber Moshe or Vayemer Moshe, Vayvaschanan, the different places where it speaks, where it's not Shaykh, this Pirush. So every single place Rashi explains it. So when it says by Daber Elokim, es kol hadvarim ha'ela, Lamer, so who is the Rebbe speaking to by Aseret Sadibas? The Rebbe is speaking to all the Yid. So what Shaykh Lamer? Lamer makes sense over here. Lamer is supposed to say to somebody else. So who's the Lamer? Who are you supposed to tell? Now you might have an answer to the question. That's fine and good. It doesn't mean the question not a question. The question, you have to ask the question. What does Lamer mean over here? The other Lamers I understand. But this Lamer I don't understand. Who is it supposed to be said to? You can say it's subsequent generations. You can say to the children. You can say it's an answer to the question. Rashi answers al hein hein al lav. That the Lamer was after the Aseret Sadibras that the Yidden answered back. That's the Lamer. Okay, in other places, when Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to Hashem, and he said, what's the Lamer? The Lamer is that the Moshe Rabbeinu tells Hashem, I'm not going to move till you answer my question. Please answer my question, whatever the case is. So there's another Lamer that was Hashem speaking back to Moshe. But it's a question that must be asked. We say Karbonis, we just have Mincha. Vadaber Hashem al Moshe Lamer. Okay, fine, good. Vadaber Hashem Moshe Lamer, what's after that? Savas B'nai Yisrael, Yomart Alehem. So what is Savas B'nai Yisrael supposed to mean? And on top, because Lamer is already that the Moshe Rabbeinu has to tell it to B'nai Yisrael. Right? And then, Yomart Alehem. Yomart Alehem. And then what's the next pasuk? Vaitev Yomart Alehem. So I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. Maybe Rashi answers it. I don't know. I didn't look. But the questions have to be asked. When you look at the puzzle, so every single word of the pasuk Rashi considers to be not understood. Why is it Elokim? It's kol advarim eila. And if it didn't say the words as kol advarim eila, what would you think? That he only spoke half of the words. He left out Anechi or Hashem or Elokecha. What does that have to say? Any other place in the Torah says, Vadaber Hashem Moshe Lamer. It's kol advarim. He said all the words that it says there. You think it said only half the words that it said there? Of course this means all the words he said there. So Rashi has to explain why it's kol advarim eila. Why it says Eila? What is that Lamer? Wherever it is in Chumash, that the question is something which needs to be asked. And in terms of Poshet, a lot of times, the truth is this is a training in a certain way for Limud HaGemara, Limud HaMishnah, Limud HaGemara. Because if you just go through something and you're supposed to, you don't understand it, but go right there, we have to cover ground, and you don't force yourself to stop and say, I don't understand this. No, so I don't understand everything in the world. I don't understand Hashem's Torah 100%. I will hard of it to try to understand as much as I can. But if there's a question on the pasuk, so that's the first thing. There's many different things. I've spoken with different people about this. They say, how do you expect a person today, the Rebbe wanted us to do like he did? So we're shaykh to go and say a Rashi Secha. So there are different dimensions of the Rashi Secha. The first level, so to speak, in the Rashi Secha is what's the question? Many times there's no Rashi. There's a question on a pasuk. And why does Rashi not answer it? Or there's a question on the Rashi does answer it, but you're not sure what's the question on the pasuk. Sometimes Rashi says the question. Then it's a deeper question. Why did Rashi here tell you the question? In other places he expected you to chap on your own what's the question. But there's a very basic zugang that all the Mefarshei Rashi take as a given, which is that when you learn Chumash, if there's something that you don't understand, you're supposed to ask the question and then look for an answer to the question. And it's written when you say a bar reik in b'mayim, you say, oh, I understand that, no problem. Why? The bar reik, the pit was empty. In b'mayim, nechashim v'kravim. But the question's a question. If you don't ask that question, as everybody knows from Rashi, that in b'mayim, that there was no water in the pit, but there were snakes and scorpions. Okay, but when you read bar reik in b'mayim, you're supposed to say, I don't understand this pasuk. Don't say, I do understand the pasuk, you're big chacham. You're a chacham if you don't understand the pasuk. You're not a chacham, you're a chacham, nish chacham. You don't know the pasuk properly. If it says a beir reik, ein b'mayim, and you don't stop and say, raise your hand, whether you're by yourself or you're in a keep the learning, that's the proper derech halimud, that you have to stop and ask the question. And if you don't ask the question, that is nish gelernt. You're going to end up with a whole bunch of questions you don't have answers to. Say to your heart of it, go and you find the answers. But that's a derech halimud. Many times I see that students get discouraged because they have a question and they see nobody else ask the question and nobody's bothered by it, so they don't want to ask the questions. They don't want to look stupid because you ask a question. If you don't have any questions, then you're smart, then you understand. If you ask a question, that means you don't understand. So what happens? So it's a decay in the whole zugang to limud HaTorah. Because if you don't understand something, you're supposed to ask a question. And then the teachers have to have enough breitkeit to be able to say 3 very important words. I don't know. Or I'll look for the answer. I'll look in Torah Shleima. I'll look somewhere else. I'll think about it. You'll find, you won't find. Sometimes it's not according to the Pshuta Shemikra. The Rebbe gave clothing. This is a level of limud HaTorah, limud Chumash, Chumash Rashi, that is shaykh to every single person. There's a sikha where the Rebbe spoke about the Taninim, ha-Taninam Ksiv. Taninam Ksiv. Why sometimes Rashi says Choser Ksiv, and sometimes Rashi says the word and then Ksiv. So what's the difference? So the Rebbe's masber over there. And the Seicha Tzamuk, the Seicha, why Rashi sometimes says Choser Ksiv, and why Rashi says the word and then Ksiv. So the Seicha. Look it up. At the end of the Seicha, there's a Rishima from the Rebbe, where he brings down a list of all the places in Chumash where Rashi does this. And the Rebbe writes that if you take this klal that I gave you, you can understand all of these different places in the Chumash where Rashi writes the same thing. So I was once teaching a seminar in Chumash, and I gave it to them as an assignment. Here's the klal, taught in the Sikha, here's the klal, now break your head. And in Pshuta Shumik, and they were not so simple. It wasn't just like you plug it in and everything jumps off the page. You have to think about it, you have to learn it, but you have to think about it and learn it in the way of Pshuta Shemikra. And to understand the things that are learned. So this is something when it comes, you can give many examples to Chumash, but the emes is you take any pasuk in Chumash and think about it. So everybody learns Chumash and Chitas, so to learn the whole Chitas like this, I understand, you're going to have a hard time getting through it, because once you start thinking about things, the mind is a very dangerous weapon, and once you start using it, it can go all sorts of places, so you use it and you think, and you won't be able to get through the Chumash. So what is, first of all. Second of all, so at least somewhat of the Eichos, this is a matana, the precious gift that the Rebbe gave us, an approach to learning Chumash, but it's something, especially with Shnasa Chamishim, it's Kedai thing to be made on the Sinyan, and the